وصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Yesterday we spoke a little bit about ta'awudh, because the streaming did not occur properly. We'll just recap what we mentioned yesterday and then we'll continue from there. Ta'awudh is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do whenever we recite the Quran. So before we recite the Quran, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. This is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us that whenever you recite, Fasta'idh billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Take the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll talk about why we need to take the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before we recite the Quran. The word ta'awudh and the word a'udhu, this is derived from the Arabic root ayn waw dal. And this word, ayn waw dal, is what formed the word uwadh in Arabic, which meant either the den, the hole that an animal burrows for itself at the base of a tree, and it's its hiding place from its enemies. Or it refers to that meat which sticks onto the bone and is very difficult to pull off. So it tells us that ta'awudh has two meanings. One is to escape from the enemy, and the other is to hold on to your protector. Escaping from the enemy is one thing, and holding on firmly to the one who's going to protect you from the enemy is the other thing. And whenever we say a'udhu, we're actually doing both. We're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us, and we're also asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to hold on to Him. So this is the essence of ta'awudh. Now, how does ta'awudh happen? Is this something that happens with the tongue, something that happens with the heart, or something that happens with the body? In fact, ta'awudh is a process that involves all three. The first thing is to get the mind and the heart in this mode that I need the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the first thing. And if the mind and the heart realizes that there is an enemy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared as my open enemy, inna shaytana lakum aduwwun fattakhiduhu aduwwa. He is your enemy, treat him as an enemy. Don't take it lightly. Inna shaytana lil insani aduwwun mubin. He's an open enemy. So once you know there's an open enemy, and you've been told that treat him as an enemy, and his harms have also come in front of you, ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. He says, I'm going to come to them from every angle. And I'm not going to leave any angle from which I am not going to attack them. So if you know there's an enemy who is looking for any angle, any space to attack you, and he is constantly trying to attack you, then why would you take that enemy lightly? Now, what do? Either you engage with the enemy and try to fight him yourself, or you take the protection of the one who can save you from him. Now there are many different types of attacks of shaitan. One of them is casting doubts, suspicions, sometimes worries, anxieties, sometimes uncertainties of different kinds. Now, either you can deal with shaitan directly, or you can just take the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we say a'udhu, I am taking the protection, it's actually announcing our choice that we're not going to engage with shaitan, rather we're going to run towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the example of this could be like when you're walking every day on your path, let's say you're going to work, there is a dog that is barking at you all the time. And it's annoying, it's loud, it's disturbing. Now what do? You could engage the dog and start yelling at the dog and telling it to quiet down, yell at it, scream at it, but that's probably going to aggravate the dog even more and make him even more aggressive. Or simply you can ask the owner that, look, I come by here every day and your dog does this every day. Is it possible for you to put the dog out of reach? And the owner can do that very easily. Similarly, we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, this Iblis, this dog, so to speak, is always in my way and always disturbing me and causing trouble. Can you put him at least out of my reach so that he can't access me? And the Prophet ﷺ himself used to take the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you will read when you study the tafsir of Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas, that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him to take the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rabbin Nas, Malikin Nas, Ilahin Nas. That Allah has all of those things that can save the human being from the attacks of shaitan. And he alayhi salatu wasalam, in his sujood, would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma inni a'udhu biridaka min sakhatik. I seek refuge in your pleasure from your displeasure. So it's almost like the place of the pleasure of Allah, those things in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased, that is a place of protection. And anything outside that is the place of the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine in your mind, there is a zone of the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone who's in there is drawing the anger of Allah. And then there's a place in the middle where if you stay there, you're safe. So, أَعُوذُ بِرِضَاكَ مِن سَخَطِكَ. I take refuge in your pleasure from your displeasure. وَبِمُعَافَاتِكَ مِنْ عُقُوبَتِكَ. I also take pleasure in the ease that you give from the difficulty that you can bring. Allah can give us both. He can give us difficulty, retribution, and He can also give us ease. So I take refuge in the place of ease from the place of difficulty. When he was sick, أَعُوذُ بِعِزَّةِ اللَّهِ وَقُدْرَتِهِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا أَجِدُ وَأُحَاذِرُ. Here I am afflicted with this sickness. Where am I going to escape from this? Where am I going to seek protection from it? I'm seeking protection in that undefeatable. Izzatik here, it means the undefeatable power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَقُدْرَتِك. And the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this pain and this anguish that I am feeling. So where do we go to? We always go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His powers, His abilities, and like Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us in that sujood, to the things that please Him. And that's where we will get our protection. And inshallah we'll continue this discussion tomorrow bi'idhnillah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabina. فتهدي الضياء لها